And we are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Like and share this video if you wouldn't mind. Help the podcast grow. And please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Lopes Goes Last podcast on Facebook and at Lopes Goes Last on Twitter. So, I know, it's been a couple of weeks since I have been able to put out a podcast, and I'm not going to really get into why here. I actually have made a video. By the time you are seeing this, it will have already come out, kind of explaining why I have not been able to make a podcast in the last couple of weeks. Link for that video is going to be down in the description. So if you have not seen that video, please go check it out if you are interested in knowing why there hasn't been a podcast in the last couple of weeks. But for those of you who couldn't care less about that, no worries. We're going to jump right into it. So a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, at the time of the recording, the NBA trade deadline ended at 3 p.m. today, and boy, was it a crazy one. Unfortunately, at least for now, I am not going to be going into most of the trades at the trade deadline. I'm going to save that for next week, where I will be kind of talking about, explaining, and grading as many of the trades that went down at the NBA trade deadline as I can. So that's going to be for next week's video. But this week, I am going to talk about just a couple of the trades that went down, a couple of the major ones that went down, along with a few other wonderful topics that I have decided that we are going to be doing this week. And you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl, obviously, because that is this upcoming weekend. But this is going to be mainly basketball talk this week. So if you guys are not into that, I'm sorry. You're going to have a hard time with this one, especially because I'm opening with the Super Bowl stuff. So just stay tuned for all the basketball stuff that's coming up. And if you're not a really big basketball fan and you're watching this video, you might struggle. I'm just going to give you a warning now. But I'm really excited to kind of talk about what's been going on here, and I want to jump right into it. So let's start with the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 50 something. I don't know what number is the Super Bowl is, but either way, Chiefs Eagles this upcoming weekend. Always exciting when it's Super Bowl time. It's one of my favorite days of the year. I love the Super Bowl every year, even if, obviously I was a Patriots fan, even if the Patriots aren't in it, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to have a good time watching the Super Bowl. So very, very, very excited to be able to watch the Super Bowl this year. And, arguably the two best teams in football are in the Super Bowl this year. So certainly there's going to be no absence of talent, or skill or anything like that. So I'm very excited, and who do I think is going to win the Super Bowl is the main question of the day, and I am going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that the Eagles this year have pretty much shown all year that they don't really have any weaknesses. Jalen Hurts has played fantastic this year. I know last year I kind of put him and Tua Tagovailoa as well in a similar boat where their arm talent just wasn't there. They were decent with their legs. If the offense was really, really, basic and really laid out for them where they didn't have to make a lot of decisions themselves, then I feel like they could have been okay. They were decent game managers, but I didn't really think that they had what it took to be Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks in this league. And not even just one, not even just Jalen Hurts, but Tua as well. Proved me wrong this year. Basically they both played when they were healthy. They both played very, very, very well for the vast majority of their seasons. So, congrats to Jalen Hurts. He's really found himself. I think the Eagles have found their guy. And, I know a lot of people were saying how ridiculous and dumb it was for the Eagles to have drafted him a few years ago when they already had Carson Wentz, who I think at the time was coming off maybe not necessarily the year before, but possibly the year before that, an MVP caliber season. And obviously Carson Wentz was the second overall pick in the draft at the time, and, he was only in year 2 or 3 or whatever it was at the time when Jalen Hurts was drafted. So, I can understand that kind of hesitation by fans and by, analysts and everything like that. But now looking back, obviously it was a fantastic pick a great choice for them. He's led them to a Super Bowl, and I think he's going to win it. I think that Kansas City is a fantastic team, and you know what? There's a world where Kansas City not only wins this game, but the experience and the versatility on offense, and playing I think above their rank really on defense lately. I think that there's a world where not only will Kansas City win, but destroy the Eagles. I actually could see a world where that happens, but I just don't think it's the one we're going to be living in. Am I going to be proven wrong? Who knows? But I'm very, very excited to watch it. I can't wait to see what happens, and I'm not necessarily rooting for anyone. I don't have, I don't particularly like the Eagles, and I don't particularly like the Chiefs either. I don't necessarily have a dog in the race here, but you know what? I'm going to enjoy some really, really good football. I'm hopefully going to enjoy a little bit of decent food, and it's going to be fun. And that's really all that matters. Is if you're having fun, that's really what matters as fans. So, my prediction is that the Eagles win. That's what I'm going with. But we'll see what happens this upcoming weekend. So as I previously mentioned, the NBA trade deadline happened, or at least it ended at 3 p.m. Eastern Time today as of time of recording. So it has been a wild one. It's one of the craziest NBA trade deadlines I've seen in quite some time. Last year was crazy as well. This year I think may have topped it. So I've certainly gotten very lucky being able to cover on this podcast 2 fantastic NBA trade deadlines in a row. And as I've said earlier, I will not be going into a lot of the trades that happened today and the previous couple of days, but there are 2 that I really want to get into right now. The first of the 2 major trades that I want to get into is going to be the trade of Kyrie Irving. Now, those of you who are longtime viewers of the channel know that I don't particularly care for Kyrie Irving. There's a lot of reasons for it. And I know that some people already think, well, he's a Celtics fan, so that's why. He just can't stand Kyrie because he left. No, I actually think Kyrie Irving leaving was one of the best decisions, or not necessarily a decision, but one of the best things that happened to the Celtics. Now, if he was on the Celtics right now as just a pure player, we obviously would be probably a lot better, or at least a little bit better than we were, or we are, because, again, he's a fantastic player. But I just think that he's a problem. Morally, I think he's a problem in the locker room. I think he is a problem with his play style as well. I don't think that the way he can be successful by, kind of siphoning the ball and dribbling a lot and everything, I just don't think in today's NBA that is conducive for long-term, consistent team success. And there's guys like a Luka Doncic who is obviously very, very, very good on the ball, right? That, his team is very good. But also, Luka Doncic is one of the best basketball players I have ever seen. He's, insanely good. So, and even he has had a hard time winning in the NBA consistently, especially in the playoffs. So, we'll see kind of what's going on there, especially because that's kind of an omen as to what I'm going to talk about here, for those of you who don't already know what is coming. So Kyrie Irving, again, as I've said, I'm not the biggest fan of his. So this is going to be very interesting and fun for me to talk about, in my opinion. So I'm very excited about it. Kyrie Irving, a couple of days ago, was traded away from the Brooklyn Nets. Now, before I talk about where he went and for whom he went, I want to talk about kind of how this trade came about a little bit. So it was, it was quiet on the Kyrie Irving front, at least in terms of the news, and at least on my end. I hadn't heard really any rumblings about Kyrie Irving for, a month, 2 months, whatever it was. Not really since his last, a hiccup where he posted a video of a pretty anti-Semitic movie. And that whole saga. I hadn't really heard much after that about Kyrie Irving. And, I have to admit, for a minute there, I started to get worried because the Nets started playing a lot better. Kyrie Irving was staying out of trouble. Nets record kept climbing and climbing, and at one point I think they had something like a 12 or a 15 game winning streak or whatever it was something crazy like that. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, you know what? Maybe now is when he's finally learned his lesson. He's going to stay out of trouble. And the Nets with KD, Kyrie, Nick Claxton, Joe Harris, TJ Warren, all those guys over there, Cam Thomas now, they may do something. I'm getting a little worried about them. They're playing really well. And then, of course, I learned that it was quiet, but that it was too quiet. Because it's almost as quickly as the silence came, it disappeared. And Kyrie Irving had very publicly requested a trade away from the Nets. I mean, it came on like, I don't know what time or what specific day it was, but it was the equivalent of like a 6 p.m. on a Thursday. Like, it was just so random and at such a random time that no one really expected it to happen. It was just so quick and out of nowhere. Maybe it was early in the morning, or it was at like 10:30, like just some random time, and on a random weekday. It just kind of happened. So very, very odd. Obviously, I would go out on a limb and say that there was some kind of, for lack of a better term, come to Jesus meeting, right, between him and Joe Tsai and the ownership over in Brooklyn, and the direction that they talked about, maybe Kyrie didn't necessarily like. Perhaps Kyrie Irving wanted to sign an extension, and Joe Tsai and the Brooklyn Nets were not willing to do so. For obvious reasons, because Kyrie Irving, as great of a basketball player he is, I have always maintained that he is not worth the trouble. He is not worth the money that he is requiring you to pay because of the trouble that he causes, that he stirs up on a regular basis. So, maybe they told him as much. Maybe, hopefully, in a little bit of a less blunt way. But, they just basically, maybe they told him, hey, look, we appreciate everything you've done for us, but we're not going to extend you in the summer. So, you can either stay, ride it out, and try and win a championship with KD, or you can leave, and we'll try and find a trade for you. And he chose option number 2. I obviously don't know what happened necessarily, but I wouldn't be shocked if that is what it is. So, long story short, a couple days later, Kyrie Irving gets traded to the Dallas Mavericks, which I know a lot of people on Twitter and even on some talk shows said that they found it shocking that it was Dallas that made the move. I actually think it's pretty much the ideal fit for Kyrie Irving. I can't really think of a team that is, at the top or near the top of either conference, really, that either could afford him or was a good fit for him. I think, somebody, a team like maybe the Miami Heat could have used him. But again, quite frankly, I don't think that they could have afforded him. I don't think that there was any way that the Brooklyn Nets would have traded Kyrie Irving away for anything less than Tyler Hero and some more, maybe some draft picks or some extra players. I don't think that, Toronto was willing to kind of part ways with Fred VanVleet. I think maybe you could have done that if you were Toronto, but even then, I don't think I would do that, considering how well Fred VanVleet's been playing and how just, how much he's beloved by that fan base. And again, with the trouble that Kyrie Irving tends to cause when he has joined teams in the last few years, right? I don't think that it would be worth it for Toronto to do. I thought about maybe Phoenix, who we'll talk about a little bit later. I thought about maybe Phoenix, but you know what? As much as Chris Paul is getting older and he's not nearly the player that he once was, he is still Chris Paul. And I understand the hesitation of not wanting to part ways with somebody who has such an incredible legacy of success and just brilliant play as Chris Paul. I can understand you wanting to keep him, despite his lack of playoff success, despite the fact that last year in the playoffs, he was one of the main reasons that the Suns choked away that lead in the playoff to the Mavericks. Again, even with all that, I can understand you not wanting to trade Chris Paul, especially if you're not sure if Kyrie Irving's going to be a fit on your team in terms of just morale, excuse me, and just, maybe even fit on the court. Would he mesh with DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker on the court? I think he would. I think Devin Booker is a good off the ball player, and DeAndre Ayton is obviously not somebody who needs the ball to be successful. So I think that could have worked, but I pretty much thought that out of every team that was successful that could have used a different point guard other than maybe the Clippers, the Mavericks were the team that made the most sense. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tyler, what about the Lakers? The Lakers and LeBron and Anthony Davis. I said contenders. Hate to break it to you guys. The Lakers are not contenders, at least not yet, because they did make some major moves at the trade deadline, which I will get into next week. But as of right now, I don't even think they are in the play-in tournament if the playoffs started today. So, it's tough for me to say that, they're a contender right now. Now, if you add Kyrie Irving to a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis on it, it's a pretty solid big three. And obviously, LeBron and Kyrie's legacies together speak for themselves. They won a championship together. So, would that make them a contender? Possibly. But again, I genuinely think that Dallas, out of every team, is the best fit for Kyrie. As good as Spencer Dinwiddie is and has been for Dallas, Kyrie Irving is better. They were able to, not get rid of a ton of depth on that team, although they did get rid of a little bit. But, of course you have to. They didn't get rid of a ton of draft capital. They got rid of a little bit, but, it didn't really, it's not going to really kill them in the future for adding Kyrie Irving. And obviously, I think that if you are able to move some of the other bad contracts on that team, that being Davis Bertans, that being Tim Hardaway Jr., contracts like that are not very good. Maybe a Reggie Bullock, if you could find a trade partner for him. He's making about $10 million despite not really putting up a lot of numbers. So, it's, I think if you can find a way to get rid of some of that, it's not going to be, killing your cap forever to keep Kyrie Irving long term, if that is the plan for Dallas, which I assume it is, as it should be if you trade for somebody that's going to be a free agent. Obviously, the plan is to then keep that player unless you're a rebuilding team, which obviously Dallas is not. I think that it's a great fit for Dallas on the basketball court. Now, obviously, with everything, right? Kyrie Irving, there's always going to be question marks. Is he going to want to play there? Is he going to want to stay there? Is he going to get along with his teammates? How is his, a play style going to affect Luka? Because let's be honest, Kyrie Irving, while he has grown in this area in the past few years, he is not somebody that can be at his full potential without the basketball in his hand. And Luka Doncic is somebody who pretty much has the basketball in his hands all the time, because he averages 30 points and 10 assists a night. I mean, he runs that offense. Quite frankly, he is that offense in Dallas. Now, it's great for him to get help, but will two very ball-dominant guards work out like that? I think it'll be fine. I actually, quite frankly, think it's going to be, it's going to be above average. I think that it makes Dallas a little bit better. So I think it was fine. I've heard a lot of people say that, it didn't make sense. And, why would you do that? Obviously, with all the question marks for Kyrie Irving, I think it's fine. I think that it's a good trade. And I'm just happy that Mark Cuban and the ownership group over in Dallas is getting Luka something. Because let's be honest. I mean, you're spending what? $70 million a year combined on Davis Bertans, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, Dwight Powell, and Reggie Bullock. I mean, you're talking about 5 players that are probably either average or below average. Maybe on a good day, they're slightly above average. If Finney-Smith is hitting his shot, he's not that bad a player, and he's a good defender. But other than that, I mean, Dwight Powell is, just an average, okay center in the NBA. I wouldn't take him above, really most starting centers in the NBA right now. I certainly wouldn't take him over somebody like a Robert Williams, who's being paid about the same amount of money as Dwight Powell is per year. So, I just, it's not a great contract. He's not providing enough worth for the money he's being paid. Reggie Bullock, doesn't play all that much, and he's making $10 million a year. Dorian Finney-Smith, he was included in the trade, but when he was on the Mavericks, and obviously still is, making this much money, he was making about $12 to $13 million a year. And again, Finney-Smith is a decent player, but again, that's about as much money as Robert Williams or Marcus Smart is making. And those are much better and more valuable players by comparison. So, and then obviously Davis Bertans, that's one of the worst contracts in the NBA. You could make an argument for number one right behind Duncan Robinson in terms of just awful contracts and just guys that are not doing nearly enough to be worth that much money. And he's making around $18 million a year. So you're talking about, somewhere in the realm of $70 million for 5 players. And again, there's also Tim Hardaway Jr., which I left out there, and I don't exactly know how much money he's making. Somewhere, I think, $14 million or something like that. But either way, you're talking for 5 players, around $70 to $75 million of cap space you are wasting for not that much worth. Now, obviously, with Finney-Smith gone, I assume that Tim Hardaway Jr. will play a lot more. So we'll see if he kind of, gives more value the more he plays, which I assume he will. But nonetheless, it's just nice to see Dallas doing something to get Luka some help. Because quite frankly, he didn't have a whole lot of help. Now, I'll say this. Spencer Dinwiddie, I am a big fan. I really like Spencer Dinwiddie. I think he's underrated, and he's been underrated for years. And you know what? The last time I think he was really getting the shine he deserved was when he played for, you guessed it, Brooklyn. When he was averaging about 20 points a night in Brooklyn when they were in their big rebuilding phase back in the early 2010s. So I think for Spencer Dinwiddie, it's good for him. He gets to kind of have a homecoming there in Brooklyn, where I know he's well loved and well liked there. And you know what? He's averaging about 18 points a night right now for Dallas this year. And so I think that he'll do great in Brooklyn. I think that he's a very nice pickup for them. And obviously Finney-Smith gives them some wing depth that they're desperately going to need now. And so, yeah, I think it was a pretty good trade all around. I think, the thing that's going to really, we're going to see who wins the trade is obviously Brooklyn got what they wanted out of the deal for their rebuild. And I think that it's going to really depend on how Kyrie Irving as a person meshes with the city of Dallas. If he comes in there and he keeps his mouth shut, which he's already not doing, and he, is humble about things and he understands he's not the alpha on that team because Luka is that dude, and he doesn't try to be the alpha on that team, and he doesn't try to take over that team and make it his way, and most importantly for Dallas, if he decides to sign long-term in Dallas, which obviously is the plan, otherwise Dallas wouldn't have tried to trade for him at all, if he leaves after this season, then you basically just threw away draft picks and, all this stuff, especially if you don't win a championship. So, I guess if you win a championship and then he decides to leave, well, it's not ideal, but at least you got a championship out of it. So definitely, if they don't win a championship, he has to stay, or else this is not going to be remotely worth it for Dallas. And you know what? For me, I don't want Kyrie Irving on my team anyway, so, it might not even be worth it if he does stick around. So, we'll see on that end. But that is, I think it was a pretty good trade all around for both teams, and we'll see how it plays out. Dallas won their first game with Kyrie without Luka, interestingly enough, the other night, I believe against the Clippers. So, we'll see kind of how this meshes between Luka and Kyrie and obviously the rest of that squad over there in Dallas. But I think it was a decent trade for everyone involved. Let's just hope Kyrie Irving doesn't try and blow this team up like he's blown up the last couple teams he's been on. All right, let's talk about Kevin Durant. Now, obviously, with Kyrie Irving being traded, the whole basketball community wanted to know what in the world was going to happen to Kevin Durant. Was he going to stick it out in Brooklyn as the lone Ranger left from the trio that never was with Kyrie Irving and James Harden a couple of years ago? Is he going to ask for a trade? Is he going to not ask for a trade and be traded anyway? We were very anxious to find out, and we found out late last night. As of time of recording, Kevin Durant was traded to the Phoenix Suns. Now, I think, again, like I talked about earlier in the Kyrie Irving video, or in the Kyrie Irving part of this podcast, if you're watching the full episode, I think that it was a pretty perfect, not necessarily perfect, but a great scenario for Kyrie Irving to go to Dallas, and I think it's another virtually perfect scenario for Kevin Durant in Phoenix. I think it was a great fit, and you know what? For 3 years of Kevin Durant, or 3.5 years of Kevin Durant under contract, they didn't really give up as much as I figured they would give up. Because you think about how much James Harden was traded for. He was traded for like 4 unprotected firsts, 4 pick swaps, 3 players, like just an insane amount of stuff going on for Houston there. They just got a crazy package for James Harden, who I think we can all agree is not nearly, maybe not nearly, but he's not as good of a player as Kevin Durant. I was actually kind of surprised to see how, not crazy huge this trade package was. Now listen, it's nothing to sneeze at. Obviously, with Kevin Durant, they traded Mikal Bridges, who's a borderline all-star, and a great, versatile wing defender. One of the best defenders in the NBA, I believe he was either a finalist or barely missed out on being a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year last year. Cam Johnson, who's a great stretch 4 that you had that's over there in Phoenix. He's not much of a defender, but you know what? He's a great piece, a good role player over there. I think there was another player involved. Jay Crowder. There you go. Jay Crowder, who they ended up trading later on. And again, I'll get to that stuff next week. But Jay Crowder, obviously, he was a good defender and a good player. And then 4 unprotected first-round picks, along with, I think, 1, maybe 2 pick swaps. I think it might have just been 1. And then some second-round picks as well. So, considering how much James Harden was traded for 3.5 years of Kevin Durant, that's not a terrible package for Phoenix. Obviously, they had to give up some good players that meant a lot to their team, and a good amount of picks and pick swaps and second-round picks and all that stuff. But hey, you know what? He's Kevin Durant. And if you're Phoenix, man, your time is right now. I mean, you've got DeAndre Ayton under contract. You've got Devin Booker under contract for a couple more years, but not 5 more. And then now you add Kevin Durant, and then you still have Chris Paul, who, listen, again, as I said early on in the podcast, he's not the same as he once was. He's not going to put you up 26 points a night. He's maybe going to get you 12 or 15. He's not going to put up 13 assists a night. He might give you 7 or 8. But you know what? He's still Chris Paul. So, there's a lot of point guards that are worse in the NBA than Chris Paul right now still, even at his age. So, I think that it was a great move for Phoenix, and I think it was a great move for Brooklyn. I think that, you know what? I'll say this, and I'm going to go more in depth with this later on when I talk about the Nets and where I think their franchise is going. Good for Brooklyn. It's very hard for teams to really hit that reset button, and Brooklyn has done that. And I'm always one of those people that thinks you should never want to live in purgatory in the NBA or in any other sport. If you're going to be bad, make yourself really, really, really bad. Let your players go try and win a championship, trade for draft picks. And when you get to the draft, if you like players that are after where you're picking, trade down, get more picks. I've always been that guy. But if you're going to go all in, man. Like, try and win a championship or try and rebuild. I think that's where you want to live. So, and Brooklyn could have very easily, considering they're, I think, 3rd or 4th, maybe even 2nd in the East right now. I don't think they're 2nd, but they're high up. They're definitely a top 4 seed right now in the East. They could have easily just kept Kevin Durant, said to their fans, listen, with Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith and Ben Simmons and Cam Thomas and Nick Claxton and all these guys, Jay Crowder, they could have said, you know what, I think we are still good enough to compete for a championship, and I would have been okay with that. But they made the very hard decision to trade away Kevin Durant, who is a generational player. Of course he is, and I'll talk about generational players more later on as well, talking about something else completely, which I'll get into. But, that's not an easy decision to make, to trade away a player like that. Those kind of players don't come around very often. So the fact that you're willing to trade him right now in the middle of the season really shows some guts and some courage. So good for Brooklyn. But again, I'll get into that more later. So back to Kevin Durant and Phoenix. I think it's a great fit. I think that it immediately puts Phoenix in the top of contention in the West. Excuse me. Phoenix, Arizona is not in the East Coast, folks. Just so in case you're wondering, in the West. So I think that it was a great trade. And again, you don't know how many more years you're going to have left to Chris Paul. And you don't know how many years in Phoenix you have left to Chris Paul either. So, because Chris Paul, he may have 2 or 3 or 4 years left, but they may not be in Phoenix, if he decides to leave. So I think it was a great trade. I think it really shows the new ownership in Phoenix. I think they were just kind of not sworn in. That sounds like they were, put their hand on a Bible and said, I swear to run a basketball team. No, not like that. But, the new ownership that was brought in after the sale of Phoenix, right? And after the whole, moral sexual misconduct debacle stuff going on in Phoenix there not too long ago. But, that new ownership is showing that they mean business. And I think that that's great for their fan base. I think it's really going to kind of, what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's gonna really give the fan base a reason to love them. It's gonna really show them that they care about their fans, and it's gonna really kind of get on the fans' good side. I think, even if it doesn't end up in a championship, I think that you, at the very least, you can't say that Phoenix didn't go all in. You can't say they didn't give everything they had to win a championship, right, at this point. So I think it was a great trade. I really hope it works out for Kevin Durant. I hope he can get back healthy. He's just one of my favorite players to watch. And also, happy he's not in Brooklyn anymore, because, my God, those Brooklyn Celtics games just gave me anxiety to no end. I couldn't stand it, because it's just one of those things where, you're just worried about what's going to happen. But either way, I'm happy for Kevin Durant. I'm happy for Brooklyn. I think that it works out for both teams. I think both trades for Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, I think, are going to work out for both sides. And so, we'll see what happens there. But again, happy for KD, and I can't wait to see how the rest of its season shakes out. Let's talk a little bit more about the Nets. The Nets have, as I've said obviously already, traded KD and Kyrie. So where does this leave them now? And obviously they are completely rebuilding, and they are looking to the future. They're going to rebuild through the draft, which I think is great, because quite frankly, Brooklyn has been going all in since 2012, and it has amounted to nothing. So I'm very happy to see them finally hitting the reset button, finally having to tell this fan base to be patient. Not that the fan base has been impatient necessarily, but they're finally saying to their fans, we're not winning a championship this year. We're not winning a championship next year. We are going to rebuild. You're going to have to be patient. We will win when the time is right. And I think, considering the landscape of the NBA and all the unbelievably talented teams right now, I think it was the right decision. But I don't want to talk about the future of the Nets. I want to talk about the past. I want to talk a little bit and look back on what really could have been. I mean, you're talking about a team that was deemed to be, at one time, the most talented basketball team to ever have been assembled. The most offensively versatile and the most dangerous offensive unit that has ever been put on a basketball court, not named the Dream Team, the Redeem Team, or any other Olympic team that has graced our planet in the United States, in Spain, in France, in wherever amazing teams have come from. The Nets in 2019 and 2018 were supposed to be the best that they had to offer. They were supposed to be unstoppable. They were supposed to be undeniable. They were supposed to be just absolutely insurmountable. And they came away with no championships, no championship appearances, and they were disbanded in a matter of a year. And now, a couple of years later, after the trade for James Harden happened, none of them are left. What happened? How did this happen? Well, I'll tell you where Brooklyn made its first big mistake. Quite frankly, its first big mistake was signing Kyrie Irving at all. And again, I know I harp on Kyrie and I'm hard on him. He's a fantastic basketball player. He is. But as I've said many times, he's not worth the trouble. And so I think when you basically signed Kyrie just to get Kevin Durant, because let's be honest, I feel like that's what the Nets did. They signed Kyrie Irving because they knew if they signed Kyrie, KD would come with him. They didn't want Kyrie. They had to have Kyrie. I think that was the first big mistake. I think you should have just tried to get Kevin Durant and tried to get, any of the other good players in free agency, or just rebuilt through the draft. But Brooklyn wanted to win a championship, and I get it. And they wanted Kevin Durant to do it. And KD didn't want to stay in Golden State anymore. And so he went to Brooklyn. And it could have worked. Many would argue it should have worked. But then you add the wild card of James Harden. Now, James Harden in Houston, very unhappy, showed up beginning of the season, very out of shape, didn't want to play for Houston anymore, thought that they were disrespecting him, all that stuff. And then the rumor comes out that Brooklyn wants to add James Harden. And I have to admit, at the time, when I read that, I said, okay, well, no one is stopping them. They're going to put up 150 points a night. Like, you're talking about 3 generationally good scorers that all 3 can get their own shot. All 3 can work off the ball. All 3 can be dominant for long stretches, even together. We saw Kyrie Irving be very, very good when he had a co-star. We saw Kevin Durant be very, very, very good, MVP level good, with great co-stars, whether it was Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, and James Harden, or it was Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. We saw that they knew how to work with fantastic players together. Now, James Harden, a little bit less so, but either way, fantastic player, and it was just going to be crazy. Now, injuries played a part in the dismantling of the Nets, of course. All 3 of KD, Kyrie, and James Harden have had their fair share of injury troubles, and many say that if KD had Kyrie or James Harden in the Eastern Conference Finals a few years back, that they may be champions right now. But they didn't. Now, I think James Harden may have gutted it out in Game 7, but he was wildly ineffective and stuff like that just because he felt he needed to be out there, which, again, I admire. I feel like that's a good thing. But either way, you didn't get fully healthy James Harden in the playoffs that year. And you didn't have Kyrie Irving at all, as far as my memory serves me. So, yes, injuries played a part in the dismantling, for sure. But the biggest thing that tore this team apart, and again, I know I keep harping on it, and I know that Kyrie supporters on my channel are just going to scream and yell and shout and let it all out, and I get it. But guys, it was Kyrie. That he was the biggest problem. From beginning to end, it was Kyrie that was the biggest problem. It wasn't the only problem, but he was the biggest. Brooklyn last year still had a fantastic chance of winning the championship. I am firm about that. I truly believe that if the cards were played correctly, Brooklyn could have been one of the best teams in the East and one of the best teams in the NBA, if not the very best team in the NBA. Kyrie chose not to get vaccinated, which is his right. Everyone has an individual right to not be vaccinated, myself included. I am not vaccinated because I did not see any reason for me to be. And if a reason ever comes up for me to become vaccinated, then I will get vaccinated. As of right now, I do not and have not seen a reason for me to get vaccinated. Kyrie Irving felt the same way. He did not see any reason for him to get vaccinated. Except the difference between me and Kyrie Irving, while there are plenty, in that scenario, the difference between me and Kyrie Irving is that I am not being paid $35 or $40 million, and I do not have an entire team of people, owners, fans, teammates, trainers, coaches, etc., that are counting on me to be available for a very specific window of the year. And that in order for me to be available during that very specific window of the year, I would have to get vaccinated. I do not have that problem, and I will probably never have that problem. Kyrie did. And he chose to forego all of that and not get vaccinated. Now he's lucky that New York allowed him to play basketball at all. And I think he was not available for home games until the very end of the season. So he's lucky he got to play any basketball. But he only had to play half the games, and he was hurt for some of it. So he didn't even play half the games. And there was just all the little things, right? Obviously the vaccination stuff. Then you get to the playoffs, and he's fasting during the playoffs when his team needs him the most. So he doesn't have as much energy as he otherwise would have. He, after the season gets over, he speaks about how he's really looking forward to building the team with the owners and with like he's the general manager, and he's not the general manager. And I can go on, and I can go on, and I can go on. Kyrie Irving was the reason why this team did not work. It wasn't the only reason, but he was a reason. James Harden, I think, left because of Kyrie Irving. I don't think that he wanted anything to do with him. So, Brooklyn had an unbelievable chance to do some amazing things, and it didn't work out. And this is going to go down as one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history. What if James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant could have worked it out? What if James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant could have stayed healthy? What if they played together for 5 years and all stayed healthy? But unfortunately, we will never know the answer to that because in this world where we're living, none of them play for the Nets anymore. And it's not 2028. They didn't have a great 5-year, 6-year run together or even a 2 or 3 year run together. They played together on the court for around 30 games. Maybe not even. It's wild to think about, man. Absolutely wild to think about. So with all this going on now, I want to kind of talk about where I think Phoenix and Dallas are going to end up now in their respective conference out in West. As of right now, I don't know which team is which. I cannot remember, but I know that both Phoenix and Dallas are the 4 and 5 seed. And if I remember correctly, I believe Dallas is the 4 seed and Phoenix is the 5 seed. Either way, I cannot remember which one is which, but I know that they are the 4 and 5 seed collectively. So where do I think that they are going to end up and why? For me, I think Phoenix is going to end up with the number 2 seed. And the reason is because I do not believe nearly highly enough in the 2 and 3 seed as of right now for me to say that they are going to maintain a very small lead from the Phoenix Suns and the Dallas Mavericks or in the Western Conference. Now, one of those teams is Sacramento. Sacramento has, quite frankly, overperformed this year. They have had one of the best offenses in the league all season. Problem, they did not do a blessed thing at the trade deadline, which, considering the trades they made last year at the deadline, I'm happy they did not, because they traded away Tyrese Halliburton, which I will never forgive them for. Nonetheless, I think that the fact that Sacramento is, I believe, only one game as of time of this recording ahead of Phoenix or Dallas, whichever one it is. I believe they're tied. I think actually their Phoenix and Dallas's record is the same, so I don't think it even really matters. They're basically the same in the same spot. I think that the fact that Sacramento's only one game above Phoenix or Dallas or both of them, honestly, at the time of this recording, I mean, I have no confidence, considering they did not get any better, that they are going to maintain that lead in the West. So I think that one or both of Phoenix or Dallas is going to overtake them by this season's end in record and in seeding. I do not think that Sacramento has enough pieces to keep up with the top dogs in the West. So I definitely think that that's going to be a jump. But that still only puts Phoenix at the 3 seed. And the 2 seed right now is the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, the Memphis Grizzlies is the team right now that everyone hates. And I actually planned on, doing a whole segment about that this week. But obviously with the whole trade deadline thing and some other basketball news going on, I had to cut it this week. But if you guys do want to see that, I would absolutely love to give that to you guys. So, let me know in the comments that you want me to talk about the Grizzlies and how much hatred they're getting. And I will definitely give that to you. But nonetheless, moving back to Memphis as a team right now and their record, they are only a couple of games ahead of Phoenix. While the Grizzlies did make a couple of minor moves at the deadline, I don't think it's anything that really gives me much confidence that they are going to really show out for the rest of the year. I do not think their roster is better than Phoenix's roster right now. So I think that inevitably towards the end of the season, I think that it's going to be a narrow lead for Phoenix, but I think Phoenix will overtake that number 2 seed in the West. For Dallas, I think that they are going to end up with the 4 seed. I do not envision them having nearly as much success as Phoenix will. And the reason is because I do not think Kyrie, Irving, and Luka Doncic are going to be so otherworldly dominant that they're just going to rise up the rankings. I think that they're going to be a better team than they are right now, which is slightly above 500. I think that they are probably going to end up winning around 48 to 50 games. But I do not envision them winning any more than that, because you think about this. As of right now, they have, I believe, exactly 30 wins, which means at the All-Star break, they have 26 losses. So that means that 56 games have been played. I think that they are probably not going to get to 50 wins, because that would mean that they would have to go, I believe, 20-6 for the rest of the season. And that ain't going to happen. I think that more reasonably, they're going to probably go around 18-8. I think that that's a reasonable record for Dallas. I think they're going to be very good with Kyrie Irving if they both stay if him and Luka Doncic stay healthy. But I don't think that they are going to rise up above Memphis, and I do not think that they are going to rise up above Phoenix in those rankings. Now, they very well could, and especially if they go 18-8, because that's pretty darn good for the rest of the season. So, we'll see what happens with that. But right now, I think that for me, I will have Phoenix at the 2 seed at the end of the season, and Dallas at the 4 seed at the end of the season. Now, do I think that Phoenix has a chance to win a championship? And does Dallas have a chance to win a championship? I think both of them absolutely do. And I wouldn't be surprised if Phoenix made it to the Western Conference Finals this year. But you know what, man? Those dudes out in Denver, they're hungry for a championship, man. And they are very, very, very good in Denver. They are 1 game behind the Celtics for the best record in the league right now. So I think that it's going to be tough to beat those guys. But Phoenix at the number 2 seed would be a great test for them. And Dallas at the 4 seed with Kyrie and Luka, they might be sneaky in the playoffs. So let's keep an eye out for that. And the last thing I want to talk about tonight, or this week for you guys, for me it's tonight, for you guys it's this week, is something that I never thought that I'd talk about, something that I never thought would happen. And that is the fact that LeBron James has become the NBA's leading scorer in history. He has scored more points than any other human being that has played in the NBA. And it's crazy to think about. And, in a lot of ways, even that thing, that particular record is not even what I want to talk about. I want to talk about generational players. LeBron James has gotten a lot of hatred as a player. And I can understand some of it. I can understand people not liking how he acts sometimes. I can understand people not liking his politics, perhaps. I can understand people not liking the way he plays. I can understand people not liking the way he tries to make himself look better than he should, maybe, sometimes. And I can understand people maybe not liking the fact that he has been one of the best players in the NBA for the better part of 2 decades. And at the same time, people still don't think he makes his teammates better. People still don't think that he is a good leader. They think maybe he's somebody that as soon as you show that you're not worthy of being on his team, he ships you out of town because LeBron's the GM, not the actual GM. I can understand people feeling all that. I do. But as much as a Celtics fan, I do not like LeBron James because he has been a thorn in my side and a point of misery for many a playoff runs in my life. Some very, very recently. I cannot help but absolutely love and respect him for everything he has accomplished. Now, before anybody goes nuts in the comment section, no, this is not me announcing LeBron James is the greatest of all time. I think that this is a tough pill to swallow for people who just genuinely don't think he is, like myself, because it's kind of hard to argue against scoring more points than anybody in the history of the sport. But I just don't think so. My opinion, your opinion might be different. That's all great. What I do want to talk about is the fact that LeBron James has been, quite frankly, the defining figure in the sport of basketball over the last 20 years. Now, you can make an argument for Kobe Bryant, and obviously he's passed now, and so his legacy as of this moment is probably more fondly remembered than LeBron's is, for very obvious and very reasonable reasons. But LeBron James has been the spearhead and the figurehead of basketball for 20 years. I want to talk about generational players for a minute. What is a generational player? How do we define what a generational player is? I have had the privilege in my life of watching a lot of great basketball players. I've also had the privilege of watching a pretty good amount of fantastic basketball players. And I've also had the privilege of watching 5 different generational players in my lifetime. So what does that mean? First, let me tell you what I think is a fantastic basketball player. Let me give you some examples of fantastic basketball players. Players that are not just great, but players that stand out from great, that stand out from the crowd, but are not quite generational. Tracy McGrady, Tim Duncan, Kawhi Leonard, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett. That's just 5 examples for you. I could come up with a few more, and if you want me to go more in depth on that particular topic, I'd love to. Just let me know in the description, or let me know in the comment section. Sorry, not in the description. You can't type in my description. Either way, let me know in the comment section. But Why those particular players are not generational is because they lack one specific ability that generational players have. Let me give you a list of a few generational players so that you guys can kind of understand where I'm at. Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, Oscar Robertson. Those are 4. And then obviously the big one, Michael Jordan. You could also say Magic Johnson was a generationally good player. Larry Bird was a generationally good player. Why are those guys not fantastic players? Why are they generational? I define a generational player as such. They are a fantastic basketball player. They are arguably the best basketball player in the world at the time that they are playing. But their defining quality that takes them from fantastic to generational is that they instill fear into a fan's heart every time you watch them play. For instance, let me give you an example. Back in the mid-2000s, when Tracy McGrady was running wild around the NBA, if you were to play against Tracy McGrady in the playoffs, would you have to worry about playing a fantastic player? Yeah, absolutely. Would you have to game plan for him and try and limit him? Absolutely. But as a fan, were you petrified of what Tracy McGrady would do to you? No. Isaiah Thomas of the Pistons, not of the Celtics. Were you petrified of what Isaiah Thomas was going to do to you on the court in the playoffs? No, you may have been petrified of what all of his teammates were going to do because they beat the crap out of you, but you weren't petrified of Isaiah Thomas just taking over a game and there's nothing you could do. Were you petrified of Paul Pierce in a playoff series? As clutch as he was the truth. No, you weren't. You didn't think that Paul Pierce was going to suddenly go off for 60 points, bury you in the ground, stomp your head into the mud, and leave you there to die. You didn't think that. And you didn't think that about Kevin Durant either. Or Kevin Garnett either. When they were playing together. Now, you can have a team of several fantastic players that beat a team of a generational player. We saw that last year in the playoffs, actually. But there's your difference. If every time you turn on the television and you are seeing a certain player playing in the playoffs, that's a lot of the word play right in a row. I didn't like that at all. And that particular player makes you actually afraid of what you are about to watch, because you are afraid that no matter what your team does, no matter what your team throws at this particular player, they will just bounce off of everybody, dunk in your face, hit 18 threes or whatever, and there's nothing you could do and you're just going to lose and you're going to go home, even if you might have the better team. If that is how you feel when you watch a certain player, that's what it means to be a generational player. I said Kawhi Leonard was a fantastic basketball player. I would have argued in 2019 that he was a generational player. For that season, he was a generational player because every time I watched Kawhi Leonard, I was afraid of what he would do. But since then, he's just been hurt and he just hasn't gotten back to the same. He certainly can be a generational player someday if he gets back to full health. But as of right now, not ready to put him there. I said at the beginning of this little segment that I have had the privilege of watching 5 generational players in my lifetime. I'm going to tell you who those 5 are, and I cannot wait to see what happens. in the comments section below. It's going to be great. No particular order. I'm not ranking them as best or worst or first to last or whatever. I'm just going to say them. Steph Curry, generational. Kevin Durant, generational. Giannis Antetokounmpo, generational. Kobe Bryant, generational. And LeBron James. Now, obviously, Shaquille O'Neal did play in my lifetime, but he was, by the time I started watching basketball in 2002, 2003, he wasn't nearly as dominant as he once was. He was a year or two away of going to Miami, and then he really started to slow down. He was dominant for a few of my younger years, of course, when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. But the Shaq that I mostly watched was the one that, he was older and he was slower and he had already been dominant. So I don't necessarily count that completely as being in my lifetime. But we could say 6, I guess. If we're going to be sticklers about it, that's fine. Those 5 players, in their own way, instill fear into the heart of a fan base. You're never comfortable when you are watching your team play against any of those players in the playoffs. We saw it all last playoff run for the Boston Celtics. 3 of those players that I just mentioned directly played against the Celtics and made me feel at any point that we were going to just get buried. And the Warriors and Steph Curry ultimately did bury them for that reason. I'm pretty sure Steph Curry averaged like 37 points a night in the finals. Something insane. You just couldn't stop him. Giannis averaged like 35 points, 17 rebounds, and 6 assists, and 3 blocks, and 20,000 free throws a game. He was a one-man wrecking crew. He had no help. And that's why I said earlier, a couple fantastic players like a Jason Tatum and like a Jaylen Brown is starting to become, and a bunch of other really great players can beat a team that has a generational player on it, even if that is a generational player. You can still have that. But at any point, that generational player can just completely carry that other team, and there's nothing you can do about it. Kobe Bryant, every time I had to watch the Celtics play the Lakers in the playoffs, every time I was petrified as to what that man was going to do. But more so than any other person that I have mentioned, every single time the Celtics have to play the Cavs in the playoffs, I would sit there, or the Heat in the playoffs, I would sit there and I would just be miserable. Absolutely miserable. Because at any moment, LeBron James will turn into LeBron James, never miss a shot, block everything, play absolutely first-team All-NBA defense. There was nothing your team could do about it. You were going home. And that happened to the Celtics like 4 times in the playoffs, where we had them on the ropes. We had the better team even, oftentimes. And LeBron James went, nope. Dunk, 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 three, dunk, dunk, three, dunk, dunk, three. And that was it. I'll never forget that Game 6 in Boston. Never in my life will I be able to forget that. Because I really thought, somehow, some way, that even though I don't think at that point we had the better team, that we were going to somehow slay that beast of Miami with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and LeBron James and Shane Battier and Mario Chalmers and all of them on there. And LeBron James with that absolute, that meme that you'll see of Joe LeBron just completely just locked in, furious, angry, put up like 98 points. and ended up burying us. 2018, I think. We had a team for the ages. It was the deepest Celtics team I've ever seen. Without Kyrie Irving, who played for the Celtics at the time. Without Gordon Hayward, who played for the Celtics at the time. A team of Terry Rozier, who's still a fantastic player. Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Aaron Baines. Like, all these great players coming together, and imagine if that team had a healthy Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward in that playoffs. I mean, it's an incredible team. We clearly had the better team because it was that versus pretty much just LeBron James. Just LeBron. He had no help. No one on his team was any good. The second best player on that team, as far as I'm concerned, was Jordan Clarkson, who is a lot better now than he was then. And yet, LeBron beat us. In my mind, by himself. He had no help. And it showed in the finals. No help. They got swept. They got annihilated. Completely murdered. Because you were going up, LeBron was going up at that point against Steph Curry, generational player, Kevin Durant, generational player, Klay Thompson, one of the best shooters of all time, Draymond Green at the time was, better than he is now, first team All-NBA defender. Just incredible. LeBron James had instilled, and quite frankly it's still in there, a fear in me that I will never be able to shake. LeBron James has made me question whether I am good at anything. Because there's no reason why a man should be that good at something to where there's no one on planet Earth that has been able to fully stop him for 20 years on the basketball court. As he gets older, injuries start to mount. He starts to slow down. But guys, he's 38 years old and he is still averaging 30 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds. I mean, this is unprecedented. I'm pretty sure, I don't remember who it was, somebody, maybe it was Jamal Crawford, I think it was Jamal Crawford, had like 2 30-point games since turning 38. And he had the most 30-point games since turning 38 in NBA history. He had 2. LeBron James accomplished that feat in 2 games. He tied the record in 2 games. And obviously he shattered the record. Now, LeBron is going to be, no one else in the history of the games ever had more than 2 30-point games once they've reached 38 years old. And LeBron's going to have like 75 or 100 by the time he's done, probably. Maybe even more. It's incredible. So for those of you who completely hate LeBron James, who just think that he's the worst thing that ever happened to basketball, really sit down and think about it. Really? Is he the worst thing that's ever happened to basketball? Look, I'm not the biggest LeBron James fan either. As I've said, he's given me a lot of misery in my life. I don't particularly like the way he acts. I don't particularly care for his politics. I don't particularly care for the fact that sometimes he just lies on camera about stuff. Like, I just don't like that. But that doesn't mean that he's not incredible. And that doesn't mean that I don't have the utmost respect for him as a basketball player. Because I do. Think about this. People thought that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record was unbreakable. LeBron just beat it. That in and of itself is impressive. But LeBron isn't just beating an unbreakable record. He's going to shatter it. If LeBron James plays for 3 more years, and in those 3 years he averages 20 points a game, between the 3. Say he continues and he averages 30 points this game or this year. He averages 20 points a game next year as he's getting older, and then he averages 10 points in his last year, and Bronny comes to the NBA, and LeBron doesn't play very much, and then he retires. Let's just say. I think he's going to play longer than that, but let's just say. 20 points a night. Let's say he takes, 12 games off a year. So he's playing 70 games. So he plays 210 games. And he averages 20 points per game. That is another 1,400 points. And that's on the low end of the estimation. That's if LeBron James only plays for 3 more seasons. And LeBron James only averages 20 points a game in those 3 seasons. And that doesn't include playoffs. And that doesn't include the rest of this year. LeBron James will reach 40,000 points and most likely go far beyond 40,000 points unless he chooses to retire even though he's averaging 30 a night. Not saying he couldn't do that, but do I think he will? No. LeBron James isn't just going to break Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record, which of course he already has. He is going to shatter it. He is going to be the one that makes that record unbreakable. He is going to be the name that no one surpasses. Think about what you would have to do to surpass LeBron's scoring record. You will have to duplicate LeBron's career. His scoring output from the time he was a rookie until the time he's 38 years old. You have to start at 18 and go to your 38. You have to have a career average of 26 points per game, which means your rookie season, you better immediately start balling out. Otherwise, it's going to really drag down your totals. You have to stay healthy for the vast majority of your career to where basically out of all of his career, he's only missed about 1 year's worth of basketball in 20 years. You will have to also not only make the playoffs pretty much every year, you have to make the finals upwards of 10 to 12 times to get to where LeBron is. And then you have to do more than that to break the record. The near impossibility that will ever happen again, there's no way somebody breaks this record. No way that someone will combine the durability, skill level from the second he stepped into the NBA, and the playoff prowess of LeBron James. That scoring record will not be touched. And if it is broken, whoever that guy is may very well be the best player that has ever played the game. And you know what? As much as I don't want to admit it because I am such a believer that Michael Jordan is the GOAT. I don't think LeBron is the GOAT right now. But for the first time in my life, it's not an easy choice. LeBron made that happen. And I think that's pretty cool. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate everything you guys have done. And again, if you stuck all the way to the end, I apologize for not having put stuff out the last couple of weeks, but I promise it's going to get better. And again, if you have not seen the video as to why I haven't, go check that out. But nonetheless, thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.